The Dallas Cowboys continue to be one of the most talked about teams in the league. And right now, there are several storylines developing that could shape the direction of the roster moving forward. One of the biggest talking points at the moment revolves around the defensive line and the possibility of adding more talent to strengthen the interior. Over the past months, there has been a lot of silence regarding certain free agents coming off injuries. And that silence has started to raise questions about timelines, recovery progress, and whether these players will truly be ready to contribute at a high level once the new season begins. There has been growing discussion about a defensive tackle who is still working his way back from a significant foot injury. And while there is reportedly strong interest from multiple teams across the league, the real concern is not the level of interest but the health situation. When a player is still rehabbing this late into the offseason, teams start to become cautious, especially when the injury timeline stretches over a long period. Availability is just as important as talent in this league. And even though this player has proven in the past that he can be disruptive, stop the run effectively, and generate pressure from the interior, the biggest question right now is whether he can stay on the field consistently. The Cowboys' defensive front has gone through several changes recently, and the team clearly still needs depth and rotation players who can step in and contribute. Building a strong defensive line is not just about having one star player, but about having a rotation that can keep players fresh throughout the game and throughout the season. When you look at successful defenses across the league, one common factor is depth in the trenches, and that is something Dallas appears to still be working on. Adding another defensive tackle could help solidify the rotation, improve run defense, and create more opportunities for the edge rushers to make plays. The interesting part of this situation is that the player in question is very talented when healthy. A few seasons ago, he had one of his most productive years, generating sacks, pressures, and making a significant impact in both the passing game and the running game. He has always been known as a strong run defender who can control the line of scrimmage, occupy blockers, and create opportunities for linebackers to make tackles. Players with that skill set are always valuable, especially for teams that want to be more physical on defense and control the tempo of the game. However, injuries change everything in the NFL. A long recovery process, disagreements about medical timelines in the past, and limited games played over the last stretch of time all become red flags for teams considering a contract. It is not just about whether a player can eventually return, but whether he can return to his previous level of performance. Teams will want medical evaluations, meetings, and workouts before making any commitment, and that process can take time. No team wants to invest in a player who might not be ready to contribute immediately or who might struggle to stay healthy throughout the season. While the defensive tackle position remains an area to watch, it is not the only position where the Cowboys could look to add help. Free agency always has a second wave of signings, usually involving veteran players, players coming off injuries, or players who are looking for short-term deals. At this point in the offseason, many of the available players fall into those categories. That does not mean they cannot help a team, but it does mean teams have to be careful with contracts and expectations. Another defensive tackle who has been mentioned as a possible fit for Dallas is a veteran player known primarily for his run defense. Earlier in his career, he was one of the more reliable interior defenders in the league, someone who could consistently rack up tackles, stop runs at the line of scrimmage, and provide stability in the middle of the defense. Over time, however, production has started to decline slightly, which is natural as players get older and the physical demands of the position take a toll on the body. Defensive tackle is one of the most physically demanding positions in football, and longevity at a high level is very difficult. Even so, a veteran defensive tackle can still have value, especially in a rotational role. Not every player needs to be a starter or play a large number of snaps. Sometimes a team just needs a reliable veteran who understands positioning, can read plays quickly, and can come in during key situations to stop the run. Those types of players can be especially valuable late in games or in short yardage situations where experience and strength matter more than speed. The Cowboys front office will likely continue evaluating both free agency options and the upcoming draft to address these needs. The draft is often where teams find long-term solutions, especially on the defensive line, because young defensive linemen can be developed over time and become core pieces of the defense. Free agency, on the other hand, is often used to fill immediate needs or add depth and competition to the roster. Another position that has been part of the discussion recently is linebacker. The Cowboys have had strong linebacker play in the past, but the roster currently still has some uncertainty at that position. Veteran linebackers are available, including players with long careers, strong leadership qualities, and impressive career statistics. These players can still contribute, especially in run defense and tackling, but the modern NFL requires linebackers to be able to cover running backs and tight ends in the passing game, and that is often where older linebackers start to struggle. Coverage ability has become one of the most important traits for linebackers in today's game because offenses are constantly using short passes, crossing routes, and mismatches to attack the middle of the field. If a linebacker cannot keep up in coverage, offenses will target that weakness repeatedly. That is why teams are always looking for linebackers who are fast, agile, and comfortable in pass coverage, not just players who can stop the run. So as the offseason continues, the Cowboys are in a position where they still have decisions to make. They can add veterans for depth, they can wait for the draft to add young talent, or they can do a combination of both. Building a roster is about balance, and the best teams are usually the ones that manage to combine experienced veterans with young developing players who can become future starters. There is still plenty of time before the season begins, and more moves are expected. Teams are constantly evaluating players, reviewing medical reports, watching film, and preparing for the draft. The Cowboys are no different, and it would not be surprising to see them continue to explore options on defense, especially on the defensive line and at linebacker, as they try to build a more complete and balanced roster for the upcoming season. As the offseason continues to unfold, the Cowboys front office finds itself in a familiar position, balancing the need to remain competitive now while also building for the future. The defensive side of the ball, particularly the middle of the defense, continues to be an area where depth and reliability are extremely important. Over the course of a long season, injuries are inevitable, rotations become essential, and teams that lack depth in the trenches often struggle late in the year when fatigue and injuries start to pile up. That is why every move from this point forward, whether it comes through free agency or the draft, has to be carefully evaluated not just for talent, but for durability, fit, and long-term value. One of the realities of this stage of free agency is that many of the players still available come with some kind of question mark. Sometimes it is age, sometimes it is injury history, and sometimes it is declining production compared to earlier seasons in their careers. That does not automatically mean those players cannot help a team, but it does mean expectations have to be realistic. A veteran player signed late in the offseason is often being brought in to fill a role, provide leadership, add depth, or contribute in specific situations rather than being expected to carry a defense. When you look at the Cowboys roster right now, there are still opportunities for players to come in and compete for snaps, especially on defense. Competition is something coaching staffs always want because it pushes players to perform at a higher level during training camp and throughout the season. No position should feel completely secure if the team wants to improve, and bringing in veterans or rookies to compete for roles is one of the most common ways teams raise their overall level of play. Linebacker is another position where there has been a lot of discussion. Veteran linebackers with long careers and impressive resumes are still available, and while they may not be in their prime anymore, experience at that position can still be extremely valuable. Linebackers are often responsible for calling plays, adjusting defensive alignments, and making sure everyone is in the right position before the snap. That kind of leadership and football intelligence can make a big difference, especially for a defense that is trying to develop consistency. However, the modern game continues to evolve, and linebackers today are asked to do more in coverage than ever before. Offenses are constantly targeting the middle of the field with tight ends, running backs, and slot receivers, forcing linebackers to cover in space. This is where teams have to decide whether they prefer experience and physicality against the run or speed and coverage ability against the pass. Ideally, you want a player who can do both, but those players are not always easy to find, especially late in free agency. The Cowboys coaching staff will likely continue evaluating whether adding a veteran linebacker makes sense or if the better approach is to look toward the draft for a younger, faster player who can develop within the system. The draft often provides better long-term solutions, while free agency usually provides more immediate but sometimes temporary solutions. Finding the right balance between those two approaches is one of the biggest challenges for any front office. Another important factor in all of this is scheme fit. Not every good player fits every system, and sometimes a player who struggled on one team can perform much better in a different defensive scheme that better matches his strengths. Coaching staffs spend a lot of time studying how players were used on previous teams, what techniques they were asked to play, and whether those responsibilities would be similar or different in their own system. A player who is strong against the run, for example, might be much more valuable in a defense that prioritizes stopping the run on early downs and creating long passing situations. Depth across the defensive front remains one of the biggest priorities because defensive linemen rotate frequently. Keeping players fresh allows pass rushers to be more explosive in key moments, especially late in games when one sack or one pressure can completely change the outcome. Teams that can rotate multiple defensive linemen without a big drop in performance usually have a significant advantage over the course of a season. As the draft approaches, the Cowboys will continue to evaluate prospects who can contribute on the defensive line and at linebacker. Young players bring energy, speed, and long-term potential, but they also require development and patience. Veterans, on the other hand, usually understand the game at a high level, but may not have the same physical ability they once had. The best rosters are usually built with a combination of both, allowing younger players to develop while veterans provide stability and leadership. There is also the financial side of roster building, which always plays a role in these decisions. Signing a veteran to a short-term deal can be a low-risk move if the contract is structured correctly. If the player performs well, the team benefits from solid production at a reasonable cost. If the player does not perform well or struggles with injuries, the team can move on without major long-term consequences. These types of contracts are very common during the later stages of free agency. The Cowboys organization knows that expectations are always high, and every roster move is heavily analyzed. Fans want to see improvements, especially on defense, and they want to see the team addressing weaknesses before the season begins. The front office, however, has to remain patient and disciplined, making moves that make sense not just for the upcoming season, but for the future as well. Over the next several weeks, there will likely be more rumors, more potential signings, and eventually the draft will bring a new group of young players into the organization. Every move from this point forward will help shape what this team looks like when the season finally begins, and the decisions made now could have a major impact on how competitive the Cowboys are throughout the year. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. Whispers are growing louder around George Pickens, and they are anything but subtle. What once seemed like a promising chapter with the Dallas Cowboys could be nearing an unexpected twist, as reports suggest the wide receiver has received a massive offer that might tempt him away from Texas. Inside sources, speaking cautiously, hint that the proposal on the table is not just financially attractive, but strategically compelling. It's the kind of deal that doesn't come often, one that could redefine Pickens' role on a bigger stage, potentially positioning him as the centerpiece of an entirely new offensive system. For a player known for his explosive playmaking and strong personality, the allure of such an opportunity could be hard to ignore. Around the Cowboys organization, there is a growing sense of unease. While no official statements have been made, the silence itself is fueling speculation. Teammates are said to be surprised by the sudden emergence of these rumors, especially given Pickens' apparent integration into the team's long-term vision. Yet in the NFL, loyalty can be fragile when confronted with blockbuster offers. Fans, meanwhile, are divided. Some believe Pickens remains committed and that the rumors are simply part of the noise that surrounds high-profile talents. Others fear that this could be the beginning of a dramatic exit, one that might leave Dallas scrambling to fill a significant gap in its receiving core. What complicates matters further is Pickens' own unpredictable nature. Throughout his career, he has shown flashes of brilliance paired with moments of tension, making him both a valuable asset and a potential wild card. If the reported offer aligns with his ambitions, both financially and competitively, the decision could come down to more than just loyalty. For now, everything remains in the realm of speculation. But if there's one thing the league has taught us time and time again, it's that where there's smoke, there's often fire. And in this case, the flames might just be starting to rise. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.